Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President of the Sandstone Group. I've also got on this as a joint podcast outing with David Blackmon. David Blackmon is with the Energy Impacts. But our special guest today is George McMillan. George McMillan has been doing lots of wonderful content for Energy News Beat. And I needed some extra help from David Blackmon as we talk about this and bring this forward. Just as our podcast listeners, George has been a private military contractor in Iraq, Afghanistan since early 2010. And all of his information is on energynewsbeat.co. And you just have to hit George in the search and you can find it. Welcome, guys. How are you all today?
Just lovely. Happy to be here. Happy to be talking to you and George.
I'm doing great.
All right. Well, George, thank you so much for your time. And we also have your slide deck. We're going to really let you kind of drive this and just kind of tee up our audience where we're at right now. There's been a series of articles that you've been phenomenal in writing. And we know that this has really changed actually the course of things in the geopolitical world. And that is when you made the phrase on the podcast, all President Putin has to do is nothing, really resonated with me because all of a sudden it dawned on me, if Putin does nothing, he's won the war.
Yeah. I'm just going to go through the slide sets real quick, and then we're going to go back and talk about each point. Let's just do a quick overview.
Good.
Okay.
I want people to see where I'm going with this and then actually go there. Tell them what you're going to tell them and tell them and tell them again. So, so this is, first of all, the title is Energy and Geoeconomics, the role of trading blocks. All right. Yeah. Go down to the next slide. Do you want to go ahead and play this now or play it later?
Why don't we tell them what we're going to tell them and then tell them and then show them, and then we'll come back to this video. This is an important video.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So go to the next one. All right. So point one, what Trump's teams does not understand is that Paris and London are going broke. They cannot pay for their enormous debt to GDP ratios. They need the energy and mineral commodities in order to pay for their welfare states. They had the Wolfowitz plan, which has failed. Instead of bankrupting and disintegrating Russia, they bankrupted and disintegrated themselves. Yeah, go down to the next one. Yeah, so now they have to pivot to Iran because they're going to need the oil and natural gas out of Iran, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, in order to collateralize their tremendous debt to GDP ratios. To do that, they need Iran destabilized, and they need the United States Air Force to do that. The covert agencies have been operating in Iran since before World War I. If people just look up, the origins of Iran or the Azeris in Iran, the Kurds in Iran, and watch all the interference that the major powers have had in Iran, they'll see what I mean. I've watched hundreds of hours of videos on this. They need the oil and natural gas reserves and the terrestrial land bridge pipeline routes to Europe. All right, now let's go down to number 3. Next, yeah. All right. The reason why Putin doesn't, delayed meeting with Trump, and yes, Kellogg and all those people, we're going to, Gorka, every night on Newsmax, we're going to deal with Putin from a position of strength and just bully him into accepting any deal we want. That was, of course, nonsense. We've been talking about that December going into January, and then I started putting the papers. Well, I had to wait until I waited until the inauguration before I put some of this stuff in writing, because this is the Wolfowitz plan that failed. So Putin's war is against London and Paris, the Western financial districts. It's not against Trump. So their plan is what backfired.
Wow.
So Putin's doesn't want to meet them because if the Western capital city banks are going broke, well, why would he want to stop now and save them? It's not letting the Ukrainian army rearm. It's about letting the financial banking center figure out what they're going to do next. All right, go down to the next one. Yeah, what Trump's team, it's scattered. Okay, the Kellogg, Rubio, Waltz. Okay, Rubio's not military, but the rest of his military advisors, they're only trained at the strategic, operational, and tactical level. If you're talking about Waltz, he's a Green Beret. They're door kickers, small unit tactics. It's that kind of so he's really focused on the operational and tactical level because being a colonel, his job is to get multiple, kill capture teams in the field for time on target, complex coordinated attacks across regions. Okay. If you need door kickers deployed overseas in a precision kill capture strikes to remove people to take them to black sites, he's the person to call. Absolutely no doubt. When it comes to geoeconomic and geostrategic models, that's not his forte. It is not. Trump is a real estate developer and a finance guy. Same with Witkoff. They do not know what integrated geoeconomic and geostrategic targeting package models are. So he doesn't have the right players in the team.
Is there nobody in the team that understands this?
No, absolutely not without a doubt. He's got PhD economists, and he's got Chris Wright over at Energy, who, if they sat down with me in a weekend and went over a whole bunch of stuff, they have the MBA experience in economic development theory to get the geoeconomic part. They got the several decades or a few decades of experience in energy to understand the energy part. They need to understand the trading block and the geopolitical part. See, people know the different pieces of the puzzle, or, they know like 2/3 or 3/4 of it, but they need that last 25%. Whatever last 25% somebody needs is different for each person. My slide sets are made to get everybody on the same page. So yeah, if you go down to the next slide, okay, that's my Telegram page, but go down to the next one. All right. The Army guys are only trained at the strategic, operational, tactical levels. All right. We'll explain that later. Go down to the next one. Yeah. All right. The grand strategic level is where finance hits the world multinational corporations. What they've always done since the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company is the original one. They know geoeconomics. It's about going out and getting the raw materials, bringing it back, and making profit from it. So all of that has never been governmental. It's always been in the private sector. And so the military guys do not understand that. But if anybody watches videos on Brown Brothers Harriman or Sullivan and Cromwell with the Dulles brothers and how they got into the Ivy League schools started the OSS, then they went into the CIA, and they send everybody through the Yale Grand Strategies courses, and then they deal with the Ivy Leaguers on Wall Street. You understand how that grand strategic level, why it's in the financial centers of Wall Street, London, and Paris. Ever since the old British or the old East India companies, all the colonial powers had them. All right, go down to the next one. All right, so every government has a board of directors. Oh, and this slide set's by Ali Hassan. The 4-level strategic one's done by Sunak, I think his name is, from Strategy Bridge. I want to throw in the citations here. I don't want to plagiarize, but every organization has a pyramid, board of directors, head of the business unit, lower down head of business functions and team leaders. So this 4-level model is a structural functional analysis of it correlates to the same thing on the 4 levels on the military side, but you can take that model and put it into society, how in this case, the grand strategic level being in the financial world and the multinational corporations include multinational media in that, because they're going to put out a false narrative of we need to attack Iran because they're going to have nukes. The real motive is we can't afford our welfare states and we need to collateralize our debt. They're not going to tell you the real motives. They're going to tell the military people, we need to strike Iran right now. Otherwise, they're going to get a nuclear weapon and bomb Israel. Okay. Now, the City of London banks don't have an intelligence unit, so they can't speak to what threats are in other countries. They need a cutout, and they use Israel, Mossad, to say that.
Wow.
Go down to the next one. This is how they want to collateralize their debt. We'll get to that later. Go down to the next one. I just want.
Well, while we're going to the next one, what we're seeing, George and David, is I'm seeing countries around the world adding global assets to their financial statements. I mean, they are trying to acquire all these things, just like President Trump did by adding all of our reserves back onto the books.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what they want to do. And Alex Craner's and Tom Luongo and Martin Armstrong have been talking about that on Capital Cosm with Danny. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've been saying it one way and they're saying it same concept, but they're in that space. So I'll use their verbiage. So
Cool.
Here, what I want people to see here is the purpose of GWAT was to move in global war on terror, is to move into the Middle East. You're taking over the oil fields, but you're taking over the maritime choke points, riverine choke points, ports, and terrestrial land bridge pipeline routes. So if you move into the 8 countries in 5 years, you're taking over the oil and gas in that region. You're taking over the land bridge between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, between the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf, between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea, the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, and Turkey, the Anatolian Peninsula, goes between it goes between all of them. It goes between Black Sea and Mediterranean to Europe.
Right.
So you're taking over. I have to say the 4 and 3 and 2 3s, 4 3 3. So it's maritime choke points, riverine choke points, ports, terrestrial land bridge choke points, and you're taking over energy, mineral, and agricultural commodities because you want to send them to factories you own so the profits go back to the Western banks. All right. And then the third one is when you're using proxy wars, you're exploiting ethnic, religious, and linguistic rivalries. Because if your army can't do it overtly, you use proxy wars covertly. All right. So we'll go back to the top and we'll go down this.
So, George, remind me, was Turkey one of the 8 countries that were originally targeted in this plan?
Well, they're targeted by everybody because they're at a crossroads.
But was Turkey one of the 8 countries? Right?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Wesley Clark talking.
Right.
In his 2007 campaign speeches.
Yeah.
No, it was. I'll just go in order real quick. He named them randomly, but if you name them in order, then you understand why I use the 4 3 3s. It's Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. And because if you look at it, you're you're taking over all the land bridges. This is really crucial,
Right?
Because natural gas delivered by pipeline is so much cheaper than LNG coming from Qatar. All right. The other three were Libya, Sudan, and then Somalia. So you're taking over. Yeah, there you go.
Right.
So you're taking over the tremendous oil and natural gas areas in that way, plus the ports and the pipelines, because you got pipelines from Tripoli to Sicily in Libya, put there by Enrique Matei during the late 60s, and he had an untimely demise when his airplane blew up.
Gee, funny how that happens.
Yeah.
And when we take a look at Syria, Syria has had a collapse because of the refusal to allow pipelines to be monetized through there, correct?
Yeah. We went through that before.
Right.
Well, I mean, I'll just run through it real quick, because it's Enrique Matei with INE when he was trying to bring oil and gas from Libya, which aggravated the French intel and the British intel and the US CIA. He also brought natural gas from Trieste into Italy. So it hooked up to the Druzhba pipeline, which aggravated the West. Then Alfred Herhausen later helped him build pipelines to Russia to bring him into Eastern Europe and then into Western Europe. Alfred Herhausen of Deutsche Bank. So you had the big 1982 gas explosion out in the Urals. And then Alfred Herhausen got hit by the EFP blast going to work. So he met an untimely demise. Then the Saddam Hussein and Assad were going to build a pipeline to Turkey and pay in euros, and they met an untimely demise one way or the other. And then the same thing with Gaddafi was going to sell in a euro gold exchange and leave the petrodollar. Then Shinzo Abe was going to complete the Hokkaido to Sakhalin pipeline, and that got stopped under diplomatic pressure, and he met an untimely demise. Then that South Korean leader, I can't remember his name, the one that was running for office.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He was going to he wanted to complete the South Korean peninsula pipeline from Vladivostok through North Korea to South Korea, and he got stabbed in the neck. Same thing with Robert Fico. So anybody that wants to buy natural gas from Russia and or exit the petrodollar seems to have, well, they need to radically improve their security detail. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
It's just coincidental, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah. It's cause and effect, I think, is a good thing. If you want
in our methodology class, correlation is not cause, right?
Right.
Yeah. Just to throw that in there.
How would you like to set this video up?
All right, let's do that.
Daniel Davis is a retired colonel or general?
He's lieutenant colonel. He's an 05.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
It can't be big enough to even threaten any kind of future action against any of the Russian areas that now in these four regions, or even the Russian speakers in other areas that will remain inside of Ukraine control under this deal if it was accepted. And the denazification, and that is probably the bigger one for Zelensky, because the Russians accuse the Ukrainians of having many Nazi regimes elements inside their actual government. You saw earlier this week, we showed you where I want to say it was on Sunday when Putin was addressing the clearance of the Kursk area, and he said this has set the conditions for our army to continue on to the complete defeat of the Kiev regime. And he has again reiterated this issue of denazification, and especially as they're getting close to the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Second World War on May 9th. He's really been hitting that denazification issue really hard, which says the defeat of the current regime, as he calls it, in Kiev. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in there. So the question is, can Trump, can Europe, can Zelensky have the leverage to compel Russia to back off of any of those absolutely maximalist objectives? Now, as I've argued many times, the answer is militarily, economically, industrially, the answer is no. There just isn't. And unless you want to go with the West full-on war with Russia, in a vain attempt to try to push this back, there is no leverage. And that's only marginal leverage, because then you have the chance for escalation. You have the chance for...
That's pretty wild.
Yeah. See, he covers it from the military perspective.
Right.
All right. None of these military guys understand. They don't understand that the Wolfowitz plan failed, and the RAND 2019 overextending and unbalancing Russia. Because the way you build strategic models is, a rational actor, belief, preference, constraint models. What are their beliefs? Then whatever their beliefs are, or objectives, that's going to dictate their preferences of what decisions they make along the line. And then constraints, how much resources can they devote to it? So, and then resources can be money, can be army, it can be diplomatic, political capital, stuff like that. So go ahead.
Let me ask this one question, because if London and Paris are panicking, and Putin, and your phrase, all Putin has to do is nothing, is dead on right, because London and Paris are panicking financially because they're in a panic. And there was rumors that Zelensky had signed the minerals deal with the EU and the UK ahead of time, and now we see a signed deal here. I don't know that it's worth the paper that it's been inked up on, to be honest with you. And so I would not trust anything President Zelensky put in front or anything else. I'm a little concerned as a U.S. citizen, to be honest with you on this.
I don't think it's worth anything. I think Trump did not know, his team did not know why Putin did not want to have a meeting with him as soon as he was inaugurated, because Kellogg and Gorka and Waltz said that the Russian economy is about to collapse any minute now, and the war is a stalemate. It's bogged down. And then you get Danny Davis and McGregor are like, no, we think Russia, they've been fighting the defensive war. They're probably have a 7-to-1 KIA ratio. WIA ratio would be 3 times that. So they probably have a tremendous advantage as far as that goes. There's some people out there that think that some of these pocket battles, like in Kursk, they had a 22-to-1 KIA WIA ratio.
Right.
Well, okay, all 75,000 troops that got sent into the Kursk region got cut off and killed. So why they would send 75,000 people into a box canyon, I have no idea. If Napoleon couldn't take over Russia with 700,000 people, I have no idea what you're going to do with 75,000. I mean, it had nowhere to go. What are they going to do? March to Moscow and then.
Colonel Davis hit on a very important point, and I just want to say this, that Colonel Davis brings up a valid, very point. President Putin has said he does not want to negotiate, and Colonel Davis verified that, says one key point is he does not want Zelensky's government in there. And now Zelensky's having problems with his own parliament because he refused to do what his own parliament is doing. So there's problems afoot within his own thing. And Zelensky has stopped the elections. So we cannot have a peace deal with Zelensky in that position, period. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from Colonel Davis, and that's what we're hearing everywhere else. Why is that not talked about?
Yeah, well, it's not talked about. Well, the people who are talking about it, Oliver Stone and his 2 Ukraine on Fires
Right.
films. I mean, and those are really good. The late Professor Stephen Cohen has been talking about this forever.
Right.
He used to be on the John Batchelor show out of ABC in New York every Monday or Tuesday. I used to listen to him.
Right.
He was always highly critical of Obama's advisors, going back to 2009. He kept on asking the question, who is advising Obama about Russia and Eastern Europe? He would just every weekend, he'd be like, I know who the typical Russian advisors are. They're all professors. They all go to the same conferences. And they're like, none of them have been contacted.
Oops.
So you just follow that. I've been following that, a little bit off to the side. It's not my major thing, but that was always skeptical. So yeah, when they started moving EU and NATO east, the purpose is we're talking about trading blocks. We'll get into a little bit deeper, but it's to erect tariff and non-trade tariff barriers to stop all Russian goods, which Russian natural gas being the biggest one, because it's really to stop a Russia export-led growth strategy where they would economically develop, infrastructural integration leads to economic integration, leads to diplomatic political integration, leads to military integration in the dime mnemonic. Well, they don't want that started, and here's the meat of the PowerPoint presentation slide set is if Russia becomes a major power and does an overland logistical supply route strategy with China, and then China with a Silk Road program is an overland logistical supply route to Central Asia to get their energy, mineral, agricultural goods. Then with that group of people, with that group of countries, you have a functional Eurasian Economic Union that would then rival the European Economic Union. All right, now it gets worse. If China integrates to the south with ASEAN, and they're building highways and railways, because infrastructural integration leads to economic integration, leads to political and military integration. So I'm going to keep on throwing that DIME acronym in there. It's that integration that they're worried about, because if you had a functional Eurasian Economic Union with ASEAN, then you would have a bigger trading bloc than the EU trading bloc. Yeah. Okay, then it gets worse. Now we're going to get to the crux of the problem. If you have Russian gas going to Germany, then you have Germany hooked up to Russia and the Eurasian ASEAN Economic Union. But then you would also have all the Danube River Germanic speaking and Slavic Danube River Valley speaking countries connected to that. So then you would have, I'll just call it a Danube River Valley trading bloc connected to a super Eurasian Economic Union ASEAN trading bloc. That would become a mega trading bloc. And then if you have Russian natural gas hooked up to Japan with the Sakhalin to Hokkaido pipeline, and then from Vladivostok to South Korea, then you have like a super mega Eurasian trading bloc, and the EU and NATO just goes away. So the purpose of doing that, teleological, logical extension analysis is, once you see the Eurasian Economic Union can snowball based on Russian pipelines and Chinese railroads, their Belt and Road program, now you know why, to stop that from occurring, they had to move, from their perspective, they had to move EU and NATO eastward, stop all Russian trade to the east. I mean, from east to west, I should say.
East to west, yeah.
Which is what they did. And then when they trained and equipped the neo-Nazi groups to go to Mariupol, well, obviously, that's the old opportunity, intent, capability rolls into play. The pre-attack indicators come into play. When you amass that kind of troops so close to Russia's critical infrastructure because it's their only warm water port, the intent is clearly to take those NATO tanks and drive them to Rostov-on-Don and to drive them down to Korea. So, Crimea, not Korea. So Russia then starts to attack back. It's a military response followed by a military response. So the whole thing about how Russia's action is unprovoked, unjustified, and illegal is such patent nonsense. Anybody with any kind of micro-tactical training knows that the opportunities, intent, and capability rule comes into play, and they did it on purpose because they took the Catholic Ukrainian speakers from the Lvov Galician area and they moved them down south where the Russian Orthodox speakers are. So again, ethnic, linguistic, religious differences, moving them in. And then they just don't tell the the Western public, European and American public, that what they were trying to stop was any Ukrainian president from adopting an autonomous, federal system like we have here or what Switzerland has.
For our podcast listeners who are not watching the video, we have a map up of the natural gas pipelines from Africa, European area, and the Asia market. And as we talk about the geopolitical trading blocks, the trading blocks moving, as we look at the tariffs, India is already looking to sign a trade deal with the United States. And I think we're going to see India in not the first, it will be very soon. And that is going to be a huge signaling block. I would rather do business with India. In fact, I can't quote the source, but they're saying they would be glad to take all of the manufacturing that we want from China. This is going to be a holy smokes Batman moment when you take a look at Vietnam, Laos, India, that whole area moving to the center of trade, and the Bank of London and Paris losing that amount of impact. They're gaining more traction with China, but China is going to end up owning them.
Going to end up owning who?
Owning the EU and the UK.
Well, they already do.
They already do.
But
you see where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah. There's a bunch of problems with that. For one thing, India's manufacturing is going to depend upon Russian oil and gas.
Exactly.
All right. We're back to, because I didn't really want to get into what's going on in Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Oh yeah.
But the United States under, boy, how much do I want to go down this rabbit hole?
Well,
when the United States exited Afghanistan, and I was there, that signaled they went back, they left the GWAT regime change nation building program and went back to Zbigniew Brzezinski's and Stansfield Turner's regime change destabilization strategy. The pallets of cash, by a number of different sources. I mean, I got my own private sources, but that were because I worked there. Local nationals telling me that the pallets of cash were landing. But yeah, eventually, Lynn O'Donnell from Foreign Policy in December of 2022 talked about it, and then Sean Ryan just this past year has been talking about it. Like he claims he was the first to know. All right, well, whatever. It's been going on. So why they think that the pallets for cash were sent there for humanitarian reasons, No, it's to destabilize all the Russian and natural gas infrastructural projects, because I'll say it again, they're stopping infrastructural integration because it leads to economic, diplomatic, and military integration also. So you stop the first one to prevent the other chain reaction. So what angered the Taliban is they want to go east because they want to get rid of Pakistan. They want, because their whole country was split by the Durand line. The Pashtun had from the Amudarya to the Indus River historically during the Durrani Empire. So the Pashtun want their Pashtunistan back. Well, same thing with the Baluch. Now, the person who was amenable to that was Imran Khan, because he's Pashtun, the cricket player. So the United States did a color revolution against him and got him out of power, and they put a Punjab back in power. Well, that's going to anger the Pashtun separatists, which includes the Taliban. That angers the Jaish al-Idol, the Baluch separatists, and it also angers the Sindh separatist. So that attack that occurred up in Kashmir this week just happens to throw a monkey wrench into a whole bunch of groups that are aligning, because the Pashtun don't like the Punjabs. So they started siding with India. Now, because what they want to stop is that international north-south trade corridor, where they only need a couple 100 kilometers more from Kash to Chabahar port to make that functional.
When they make that railroad functional, they're going to have pipelines go right next to it.
Right. They're going to have pipelines go right next to it. And if the Baluch break away from Pakistan, but I hate to say the word Pakistan because you're really talking about they're breaking away from the Punjabs. Okay, the Punjabis. That's the way they look at it.
Right.
So, and then the Sindh wants to do the same thing. Well, if Afghanistan, Baluchistan, and Sindh break away, well, now they can run the pipeline straight through the southern part of what is now Pakistan to Gujarat, India. And then India is connected to, well, it's not just Russian natural gas. It's Iranian. It's Iranian, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan natural gas.
Right.
It's Kazakhstan natural gas, Uzbekistan natural gas. So now you have tremendous two-way markets that are about to come online that are only a couple years away from happening.
Right.
Under the right conditions.
This is a major change.
Right. So when you're using covert activities, you are doing that to throw a monkey wrench to stop those infrastructural projects from happening. So the trade deal with the United States to India is predicated on infrastructural projects that the neocons are trying to stop. You get a whole bunch of contradictions in here. But
so when I teed up that statement, I already knew some of this, but I teed it up for you to explain that.
Oh yeah, well,
it's ugly.
Yeah, because I was in the Middle East working. Well, if you're working on terrorism, you're working on counterterrorism, because obviously I'm not there to promote it. If you're working on counterterrorism, you're really working on unconventional warfare and counterinsurgencies. So I had to read a lot of those manuals and learn all those groups. So, that was there for, 13, 14 years almost.
Right.
So, and I lived there year round. I would vacation there year round, go through Eastern Europe, and I, travel through Southeast Asia. And guess what? I always like to go look at infrastructural projects for some reason while I'm on vacation.
George, you've been right all along on this whole process over the last several years as I've had you on the podcast and talked to you and read your articles on energynewsbeat.co and my Substack. And If you were able to tell President Trump something today, what would that be? How would you solve, or what would you do in order to get him to the next level?
Oh, it would be get out of Ukraine, because Putin's goal is to collapse the Western financial banking centers who are trying to collapse him. Okay, they could have let Russia into the EU. They could have, but they chose not to. They wanted to encircle, economically strangle, and disintegrate Russia. And this is a key point here, a major key point. They have the Western superpower, colonial major power, vassal state hierarchy wants to expand by bringing in energy, mineral, and agricultural rich vassal states. They don't want to partner with another major power, because then the major power would be bigger than the UK and France. They want to pretend that they're still colonial powers that matter. If they brought Russia in as an equal, well, then they would fall between Russia and Germany, and then the UK and France would become irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that's why they did that. But then they still want to collateralize those resources. So they thought that if they, raised the tariff and non-trade tariff barriers on Russia, their economy would disintegrate. Well, it didn't, because if Russia and China weren't doing an overland logistical supply route strategy that was coordinated before the 2014 Euro-Maidan revolution, they doubled down on it afterwards. They doubled down and quadrupled down on that afterwards. So now they know that the only way these banking centers can collateralize that debt is to attack Iran. So Trump should not attack Iran.
No,
because I know the Western media, tries to throw some kind of stupid psychological reason on Iran and Xi and Putin. It's like, no, look at these energy and pipeline maps. Instead, a geoeconomic, geostrategic analysis fits. They look as Iran. Well, the West looks at Iran like the weak point in the chain. So what does that mean? Russia's going to send they're going to send its IADs and SAMs, integrated air defense systems, surface to air missiles, down to Iran to support it, so the U.S. won't attack, knowing that the end goal is to get the energy from that region and collateralize their debt, but also to break up the Eurasian Economic Union. Well, they want, so now they've doubled down, they being Russia and China, have doubled down on their Silk Road and Belt and Road initiatives in order to make sure that the Eurasian Economic Union happens and it absorbs ASEAN. So now they've double, triple, and quadrupled down on that strategy.
So to relate this to a story that our news media actually reports, all this stuff about Iran and attacking Iran, Mike Waltz was just jettisoned as the national security advisor. Conventional wisdom in the media, anyway, contends that one of the main reasons why Trump wanted Waltz out of that job is that Waltz is a neocon who was advocating strongly for attacking Iran. What do you hear? I mean, is that media narrative in any way accurate?
I'm fairly sure that Mike Waltz's team got my slide sets and those papers I sent into the Russian natural gas and realignment papers.
Yeah,
that have been posted on Stewart's site since after September 15th. Well, we did a handful last year in December going into January. Then I revamped the slide set and we threw up, I think, 7 more.
right.
And then recently we followed up with 8 why Kellogg plan was DOA. It was never viable. If you read the Russian natural gas and global realignment series of papers, yeah, you would know that the Kellogg plan was never viable. So that's why I'm saying that Trump's military staff just doesn't know anything about this grand strategic level, because who's at the grand strategic level? It's the financial people. Who do they hire? Economics and finance PhDs and MBAs, and then they send the select ones to the Yale Grand Strategies classes or the Grand Strategies classes at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London and a few other places, maybe the war colleges and some of the, or like Link University in Rome and things like that. They have these private universities that they like to send their assets to. But
so Bessent doesn't understand all this?
No. He hired people that are trained at the military level. They're only trained at the strategic level.
Yeah. But I'm talking about the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
They'll know the people in the finance world. Okay. But how they do their strategic plans, they won't. But since he's a PhD in economics, he will know how to build rational actor belief preference constraint models. So he would easily be able to read my work.
Okay. So, I mean, one of the reasons I ask is because the rumor is, of course, that Bessent was one of the ones complaining about Waltz. And it was part of the reason why Waltz ended up,
I don't doubt it,
going to the UN job, which is basically a ceremonial position.
Right. Well, Waltz, all the TV generals, I don't care which one. Okay, he's only a colonel, but all of them, all they do is just read the script from the Institute of Study of War, the Hudson Institute, American Enterprise Institute, Brookings, all the Kagan run institutes. All they do is just go on TV every night and just read the scripts. So Trump is listening to General Jack Keane and Kellogg. Oh yeah, the Russian economy is failing. It's going to collapse any second now. No, they have a demand pull inflation. They have inflation because once the Western companies pulled out of the oil, well, then other countries moved in and their oil production did not collapse, far from it. But the big thing is the profits stayed in Russia. They're not hemorrhaging cash anymore.
Right. They're not going to BP and Chevron and Exxon anymore.
Right. It's not going to Aberdeen. It's not going to City of London. It's not going to Brussels. It's not, it's not going to Total.
The wealth got transferred to Russia, and that drove them nuts.
Right. So because the purpose of the superpower, colonial, major power, vassal state hierarchies is to take over the commodities, send it to factories you own, where the profits go back to the colonial powers and Wall Street. So since they're trying to, if the Eurasian Economic Union, the Eurasian Economic Union, ASEAN Economic Union takes hold, well, then all the profits stay in Eurasia. So you're talking about a shift in the global political center of gravity. So Putin has no incentive whatsoever to have a discussion with Trump, because Trump is just a short timer. His fight, just to make it real simple, his fight is with the banks in London. It's got nothing to do with Trump. And that's the part where Trump is ill-advised. He doesn't realize this got nothing to do with him. He's just a short timer. Because if he's going to be impeached in 2 years, because if the Democrats win both houses, they're going to impeach him in January of 2027 anyway. So why does Putin want to make a long-term deal and with someone that may not even be around? He may not even finish his 4 years.
No, right. And President Putin has made several public statements, George, that I think is a big hint. We heard from Colonel Davis. We heard from him that there's one sticking point to getting the war ending. The war has to get rid of Zelensky administration. period. They got to have an election, got to have a whole new government in there.
Right.
Otherwise it ain't going to happen. Second piece of this puzzle is the fact that President Trump really needs to understand that Putin has asked and offered critical minerals and wants to do business with the United States in a long-term fashion. That to me seems more critical than passing statements. Those are the way to Putin's arm. Putin has actually gotten his country to a 4.2% increase in GDP. Germany has got the second year of failing. I mean, you take a look, and so as Germany goes, so does the rest of the EU. That's critical to get him to the table.
Yeah, just a couple points here.
Yep.
It's been Boris Johnson that stopped the peace plans. Why? Because who does he represent?
The city of London.
Yeah,
Bank
okay.
of London, yeah.
So they wanted to make sure that kept on going, because on LinkedIn I was writing on the Istanbul deal, and I knew it aggravated a lot of people because I threw it in the intelligence community on LinkedIn. Was I put in, watch Zelensky switch sides? Well, and some people got very mad at me for saying that. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, Zelensky got his first $40 billion. It was to make sure he didn't switch sides.
And his wife got a $18 million Bugatti, and then Zelensky just was able to buy a $2 million Princess Diana dress. And this is after Zelensky has been able to buy a ski resort in France, I believe. And then he's got a $2 or $3 million house in Florida that we know of. And there's all these other stuff. This is what my tax dollars have been
Dubai
paying
and everywhere else.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're buying their villas in Dubai and the Swiss, and in the Alps. Yeah,
and there were 9 Ukrainian generals that had their houses destroyed, multi-million-dollar houses destroyed in the Palisades fire. Nice.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Earth Liberation Front got them there. That's,
oops.
I wrote that on LinkedIn. Somebody went nuts because they never heard about the Earth Liberation Front. So I just started dropping all the news articles because the mainstream media doesn't report it. So it must not exist, right?
Right.
I just started all these people that were caught by local police departments for arson. I just started dropping the links in there because
David, you and I have got to get our trolling game on a little better. Tom Kirkman is one of the best trolls on the planet.
Tom Kirkman's got a much better trolling game than we do.
Oh yeah. So George is up there with Tom. And so we got to you and I just got to I'm too stupid. I gotta up my game up.
My mind's not that. I'm like George Costanza. I think about those things later.
I'll throw out on LinkedIn, and this is why nobody comments on my pages anymore. I'll throw out my worst piece of information or make it sound like a conspiracy theory on purpose. And then I wait for somebody to reply and then just bury them with the avalanche of evidence. So that's why people stopped replying to my stuff long ago. Because once people see the evidence, it's like, wait a second. Anyway, I want to get back to this argument because it's the city of London that's trying to bankrupt Putin. And it's the same city of London that, was Stefan Alper that tried to impeach Trump. They set up George Papadopoulos, the Steele dossier. They set up Mike Flynn, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, the whole crew. So why is Kellogg trying to get a plan that would ultimately save the EU politicians and the NATO people who were behind trying to set up Trump's people and assassinate them? He actually has a parallel path with Putin. If Putin is just going to go ahead and bankrupt these people, why on earth is Trump getting in the way of that? Because it's the same people that are trying to assassinate him. So why would you want to keep him in power so they can assassinate him and impeach him in the 2017 midterms? Why his strategy is so illogical.
George, you made comments that just made my head go explode. I mean, you sit back and think, you just made a statement because the EU government funded a bunch of people to come in and ran a campaign and had people trying to help get Kamala Harris elected from London. Then you have ties to Ukraine on the assassin at the golf course that maybe even have been funded by Ukraine. Oh, he may have been funded by our tax dollars. Holy smokes, Batman. Why does President Trump want to help the EU?
Oh, yeah. It's just his staff. They're only trained at the strategic level down.
Wow.
Nobody's trained at the grand strategic level. He's got plenty of PhD economists, and he's got Chris Wright, who knows economics and energy.
Chris Wright is one of the classiest guys on the planet. And I just want to keep going on and say that the difference between Jennifer Granholm, who has got the brain power of a potato bud, and that is a technical term, and she barely can find the door to an EV. I mean, she doesn't even know how to spell EV. And now we've got actually a humanitarian that understands energy and is a mover and a shaker. Man, that is a whole different change.
Yeah, he really should give me a call because he would understand. Him and Scott Bissett and stuff, and the PhD economists would understand my stuff very readily without having to take a semester course.
I'll see if we can make that happen because he's got an international team of folks that need your information.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because they don't know it. I put that paper on that 103-page paper on World Geostrategic Insights the other day. So it's how these things work, and I laid it out, in rational actor belief preference constraint models because modeled after von Neumann, Morgenstern that invented theory of games, and John Harsanyi, who's a Nobel laureate with Selton and Nash. I met John Nash several times, and Herbert Gintis, who's blasting the social sciences for not having scientific models. And then I do structural functional analysis of how this works, like Talcott Parsons and David Easton from Harvard. So all of my people are from the major universities, military academies, and war colleges. That's all my citations are. So yeah, this I threw that into World Geostrategic because it needs to get out there. Because Trump and Witkoff, they're real estate and finance guys. They could understand this if somebody sat down and actually walked them through it on a map. Well, plus my slide says papers, this, that, and the other thing. But yeah, my stuff went through the military side, and it didn't go anywhere.
Well, it did go somewhere because it changed how their behavior happened. Was it cause and effect? Because as soon as they got your papers, things changed. So we'll go there. David, we've only got a few more minutes here. We got about 5 to 10 more minutes, but what are your thoughts and questions for George as we try to unpack this last hour?
Oh man, there's so much. I just worry about this. I mean, I'm afraid after signing this minerals deal, we're going to end up going right back into the quagmire in Ukraine.
And who wants him to do that?
Right. Well, yeah, obviously, but that's not why he got elected. If he does that, then his popularity rating really will start to crater. Right. He'll start to lose the base.
I was talking to a bunch of SOCOM folks back in 2022. Well, Michael Jan's friends, explaining this back then because nothing's changed. My models haven't changed. Or at least, they've gotten a little bit more sophisticated, but, they've expanded. But the fundamental
sophisticated in George?
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm being a smart aleck. I know. I'm laughing in here.
Oh yeah, shut up, Stuart, before I break your neck.
Yeah.
Stop interrupting.
So I mean because like back then I knew that if Trump gets elected, the people that know the real geoeconomic and geostrategic targeting package models are going to be a handful of PhD economists in London and Wall Street and Paris. They don't even tell the rest of the people in their companies what they're doing. They feed everybody else the false cover for action narrative. Oh yeah, and people really should go on Energy Newsbeat and on my Telegram page to read those papers, because we're explaining it verbally, but if people actually sit down and read it and start looking at maps,
your articles are heavy traffic on my site. I just want to
good. Yeah,
heavy traffic.
We listed them all on our Telegram site, so people can find the links really easily.
Right.
So, because this thing about the people that do know the geostrategic level of thought, make sure that all the DC think tanks just repeat the false cover for action narrative. So, and then they make sure that if anybody out there is like, that starts to question stuff like a Tucker Carlson, they make sure that they're fired.
Right. Yeah.
So anybody out there that knows Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, they should look into this stuff too. Because I already know
they created a monster with that, though. I mean, they fired Tucker Carlson, and now his audience is about 20 times bigger than it was at Fox News. So they kind of created a monster by running him off.
Oh, well, okay. Well, just like the Wolfowitz-Rand plan, failed in the Middle East and in Ukraine, and it's backfired and has created a Frankenstein monster. Yeah. The more that they
consequences.
I'm looking at my site, and there's a bunch of people in Washington looking at your articles right now. I'm serious. I could share the screen and show you. It's nuts.
Good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
I think it's great.
All right. I guess I'm about to be swatted any minute now.
Yeah,
well, we are too, probably.
Yeah. Anyway,
won't be the first time.
No. Now, this video is actually Putin trying to tell Zelensky and how to do a negotiation, but I think this is actually George McMillan and Stuart Turley having a discussion. Which one is Stuart and which one is George? I think I'm the dog. Watch this. Okay, that's George McMillan, having to handle a podcast host. Sorry, George. I am what you get, baby.
Yeah. We're doing good.
Well, George, how do people find you? They find you on your LinkedIn channel, and I'll have the links to your Telegram.
Right.
And go to energynewsbeat.co, search for George, and or go to the upper left-hand corner, and you'll be able to see your site. If you look over my shoulder, you go to here, go to George McMillan here, and your page is George McMillan right there. You've got all of the stories and everything all lined out, and it's a very heavy traffic volume. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I want to, and now that David has my Telegram contact information.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get that all figured out.
Yeah, I mean, you really should invite me on one of your shows.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Absolutely.
To my way of thinking, that would make sense.
Good.
Because
this one is going out, George. What we've done actually this week, we had Robert Bryce on, and so David and I tag teamed on Robert Bryce, and Robert Bryce is one of the most cool cats on the planet in energy, and both of them are going out on David Blackmon's Substack, my Substack, this one. So when we fan these out, we fan the transcripts out on both channels, and they'll also go out to Apple, Spotify, on David's channel and my channel. So that when you sit down with, me and pretend that you just go over and hit me in the head, but you're actually going to be hitting his folks too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now that I've, been in the minor leagues and worked my way up, I want to work my way up to David Blackmon's level.
Yeah, well, you got to get through me to get to him.
Yeah, well, okay. I had to work on my game.
Right. Okay.
Before we go,
we'll do that. We'll do that here.
Okay, make sure.
There's Tom Mumford. Talk about the law of unintended consequences. We love Tom.
Yeah.
All right. With that, everybody, I'd like to just go ahead and close this out. And David, thank you. Any last thoughts?
Oh my God, my head's spinning. We're in a hell of a mess, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Here's Jeff Chestnut. We love Jeff.
Well, they're not unintended by France and England, that's for sure.
Oh no.
No.
And anyway, well, with that, we'll look forward to visiting everybody soon. Here we go.
All right.